So we have 11 minutes and 57 seconds for questions and answers. Yes, sir. Does somebody want to go around with the microphone? Here's one. Okay, you can just yell. I'll repeat the question.
All right, the question is, could you say something about coconut oil and saturated fatty acid from plants?
Yes. I will repeat the question until we have it. Okay.
And the second part is, whenever I'm speaking about
Okay.
could you say something about saturated fatty acids in plants, for example, coconut oil? Mm-hmm. And whenever I'm speaking about this topic, people in Germany say, oh, that's all the soybean lobby that's saying that saturated fat is bad.
So they're both highly controversial, but I can tell you what the trends are. Right now, there's a good recognition in the coconut area that we ought to be doing more research. So if you have David Katz at Yale, the nutrition cardiology guy, who originator of the True Health Initiative, saying coconut oil is fine, it's a shorter chain fatty acid, it's perfectly safe, prove me wrong. That's what people need to do, is prove him wrong. On the other hand, you have the American Heart Association saying we don't have great data. That paragraph says we recommend against it based on sort of heuristic logic rather than data. That's not a comfortable place for them to be. Everyone wants a level of evidence A, class 1 recommendations, and they have to admit that this is opinion of experts in the field because they don't have the data. On the soy stuff, this is really something that's gone back and forth. You had people with a history of breast cancer or a risk of breast cancer avoiding it. And the interesting part of that never made sense. You had so many women in Southeast Asia having soy as a major portion of what they're eating, and having low evidence of breast cancer. And so and it's another area that would require, and not so much, I think there's enough, if you Google it, you'll see, yeah, we were wrong about soy is just fine. But the holdouts would be people who say the soy protein isolates may not be as safe as eating edamame. And that may be true. I'd like to see more data on it. So both good questions, both that we need more data. Yes, ma'am.
Did you say that there was a relationship between lack of iodine and atrial fibrillation?
So lack of iodine can give thyroid disease, particularly hypothyroidism, goiters. And anytime you upset the thyroid, high or low, you can have a risk of atrial fibrillation. So, indirectly. No. That was in the paleo diet. And that's a shock to everyone that you go paleo and you get iodine deficient. No one would have guessed that, but that's what that was what was found. Yes, ma'am?
I was very much troubled by a number of doctors / dietitians that spoke earlier in this conference when I specifically asked the difference between juice and a smoothie. And and they said juice is better, basically.
Juice is better?
Yes. And I said something about the fiber in my question, but it was negated. So, and I was just appalled because, and then I see you with this graph up here saying, eat blackberries when you have grapes, or whatever it was you said. This is one of the graphs I would like to see. Would you, all other things being equal, is it not much better to have the fiber with the fruit and the sugar that's in the fruit than not?
So I imagine if they were talking about that, they were talking about just non-cardiovascular stuff. The cardiologist has to be afraid of insulin. And if you do the juice without the fiber, you will get an insulin response as if you took a tablespoon of table sugar and put it in your mouth and swallowed it. And so we want to very much avoid that if we can. Okay.
Can I say something? They're referring to green juice, no fruit in the green juice.
Oh.
That's what I was going to ask. Is that the same with green juice, with vegetables, like the nothing else?
So when you're doing remember, let's make sure we're distinguishing smoothie from juicing. That is, the blender leaves all the fiber in. And okay. So, obviously, being a data file, and a data file, PH versus FI, I would actually love to see insulin study, blood sugar response, like the one I showed you for glucose, fructose, sucrose. We'll love to see that study done. Until we're doing that, it's speculation. But the speculation would be that it's a source of sugar without fiber, it's probably going to go up. Now, having said that, there may be some other, like a massive amount of nutrients and minerals and vitamins that somehow come along with that. That may be true. And maybe there's a balance there that I'm not aware of. But if you are an insulinophobe, like most cardiologists should be, you would want to have the smoothie rather than the juice. And so the real question I'd have to ask about the green juice would be, where did the fiber go? Did it go to the bottom? Is it thrown out? It's thrown out. Yeah, not comfortable with that without data, but hey, people, like we say, in God we trust, everybody else bring data. I'm sorry?
Is it the same if it's only green leaf? There's sugar in green leaf?
So there are plant sugars and plant carbohydrates in almost every plant. So sure, I'm sure there's some, yeah, and one would have to do the studies to figure it out, I'm sure. Okay. Yes, ma'am. He's got the mic.
Yes. My question is, what are the side effects for statin drugs?
So statin drugs?
Yes.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last night, but we should talk about it some more. I think, I don't know if I said this last night, I say it all the time. So the biggest side effect of statin drugs is breaking the Medicare trust fund because people are not dead. Yeah. So, but the more serious answer, it's usually myalgia. That's a fancy term for muscle soreness. Rhabdomyolysis is the big fear. That is where your muscles actually leak enzymes because there's true muscle damage, and that can plug up your kidneys. And unless you're on dialysis, it would be fatal if it wasn't recognized. So that would occur in less than one of them in a million. It's usually when you combine the statin with like a fibric acid, like gemfibrozil or something like that. One of them actually got taken off the market for that. It was one of the best statins. It was called Baycol. And rather than deal with anything, even though they knew it had only occurred with gemfibrozil, instead of just putting a warning label, they said, we're taking, I don't know what the dynamics were in A.H. Robbins to decide to discontinue that drug, but anyway, that, for those people who were really worried about it, that was good evidence that the industry is even more worried about it. And if these drugs were really dangerous, like people always say they are, they wouldn't be in the business of doing it because they're very risk averse. I mean, it's not that A.H. Robbins doesn't care about people's cholesterol, but they do care about their shareholders. And these drugs are extremely profitable because they keep people alive and they keep buying them. And so anyway, you will see a variety of reports. And that includes everything from tendon rupture, which I tend to believe marginally, to brain fog, which is absolutely not true. People take it and they feel foggy in their brain, and then they stop it and they still feel foggy in their brain, or they think they do, and then you do a randomized trial and you find out that they're the same. And it may be that there is some impact on, based on genetic polymorphisms, that it does affect some people's brains. So I don't rule it out when somebody comes and tells me something, because I have to leave room for individual variation. But as a population, most of the things they say about statins are related to something else. So we actually have a statin intolerance app from the American College of Cardiology, and you go through every step. And the biggest one, if you think that it's your statin that's doing it, is you withdraw the drug for a week or two, and then you start up again. And if the symptom went away and then came back when you started the drug again, you feel pretty comfortable that that is the statin. So then you start doing other things, like 3 times a week, or changing the brand of the drug. And if people, nowadays, the sort of standard of care is that if you don't tolerate 2 statins, you have intolerance of 2 of them, then you can apply to your insurance company and see if they'll approve one of those PCSK9 inhibitors. So anyway, you just got 4.5 minutes of something that I think shouldn't actually occur, because if people were doing plant-based nutrition, they wouldn't need all of this. Okay.
Good afternoon, doctor. Thank you for taking my question. My question is this. Vegans and heart attacks, is there any kind of study on that, or reason for the cure, or the cause? I mean, I heard of a person or persons that have had heart attacks and they were vegan.
And they were vegan?
Yeah.
So I'd have to ask a couple questions. One, you saw my healthy plant-based diet talk in Journal of American College of Cardiology last year. What kind of vegan were they? Were they eating the potato chips and the French fries? Exactly. So there is an unhealthy plant-based diet. Obviously, most of us would think that the optimum would be whole food plant-based, no oil, right? Okay, you've heard that many times. And the Esselstyn data was, I think, wasn't a 0.6% cardiac event rate, and that is tremendously better than what you'd get with the standard American diet or an unhealthy plant-based diet. Good. Yes, ma'am.
What's the role of sodium in the whole cardiac?
Oh, let me tell you about sodium. So for those of you who couldn't hear it, the role of sodium. No question about the fact that if you have high blood pressure, that sodium actually increases blood pressure and mortality and heart failure. But then you've got data that's kind of crazy that says that if you restrict sodium in heart failure patients, you increase mortality. You decrease hospitalizations because if you lower the sodium, they don't get the swelling as much. They don't get volume overloaded, but it increases the mortality. So if the death rate's going to go up, what should you do? Then you had the PURE trial, those same people who said you should be eating fat instead of carbohydrate. Probably not the best interpretation of their data. They actually said that the optimum area, unless you had high blood pressure, the optimum lowering of death rates with sodium was, you ready for this? 5,000 to 7,000 milligrams a day. That's not doable. I know Americans are eating 4,000, 5,000, but this is not good at all. So I only have two things to say. One is, sometimes we ought to admit it when we don't know what we're talking about, and I think sodium is one of those areas. That if you have heart failure, you probably are better off eating sodium and going to the hospital, than dying with that's associated with the low sodium diet. I don't think we understand the mechanisms for any of that, and we need more data. So that's really where we should be going with this. So we have the American Heart Association saying 1,800 milligrams per day. You have the study that I showed you said 2,000 milligrams per day, keep it below that. You have the World Heart Federation saying that it should be 2,500 per day. You won't get people to agree because the data is all over everywhere. It probably has to do with who they're studying. Now, somebody mentioned those veggie burgers and increased sodium. The remarkable thing about it is that the blood pressure tends to go down with the high sodium. And all I have is a theory that is plant-based people are less sodium sensitive. How would that make sense? The more plant-based you are, the more potassium you have. And potassium versus sodium is like a one-to-one replacement. The more potassium you eat, the more sodium you excrete. So it may be that that's the confounding variable in all of these trials. Is it 5,000 to 7,000? Is it 1,800? Probably depends on how much potassium you're taking in. Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
We're here. So just a comment and two quick questions. I think the biggest obstacle for people to change to plant-based diet, even if they know all the data, is the emotional attachment to food and what it represents culturally. Like if you're used to doing barbecues all your life with your family every weekend, and now you can't do that, you're not gonna change, or it's gonna be really hard for a person to change. That's my comment. So, and my two questions is, if you want to become vegan, where do you start? I mean, I think there's a lot of information and sources, and it's very overwhelming for somebody. Like, should you go to a nutritionist, or should you read something, or should you, I don't know. And my last question is, can you share what you eat on a typical day?
Okay, so in reverse order, I tend to eat a fair amount of vegan restaurant food just because of the convenience of it. And I don't have a lot of time for cooking and that sort of thing. But my criteria is I don't want a lot of fat. I don't want a lot of sodium, despite what I just said about not knowing about sodium. And I don't want any animal products whatsoever. And the good news is that there's more and more availability of healthy foods like this in restaurants and grocery stores. Where do you start? My 11th vegan cardiologist at Rush actually put together a 3-page sheet full of this sort of thing. I could kind of share it with you, I guess, but it's stuff that's all over the internet, and some of it's inspirational and goes to the first question, that is trying to inspire people to change their lives so that they know. One of the most effective, I'd say there's 3 things that I have found that are very effective at getting people motivated to change, okay? The first one is actually having a high level of education. The higher the education, the more open they are to it. You probably could figure out or tell me why that is, but it's a consistent observation. Number 2, a vegan daughter. How many people have vegan daughters? There you go. I mean, it really makes a difference in a household to have a vegan daughter. It's a consistent finding. And having a coronary event, a cardiac event, that really does motivate people. So it's an opportunity to really make behavior change. So, getting people to change when they're comfortable with what they do, you're bucking their family, their parenting, their church often. You're going against their entire culture. And so it's not the easiest thing to do. Okay.
I just want to say one thing.
Uh-huh.
Less than 2 miles from here, every Saturday in June, we have the Vegan Living Program. There's a flyer up there, talk to me. It's every Saturday in June. This will be the 5th year. It was started 10 years ago in Baltimore. It covers a raft of these.
Wonderful. So I really should add that to my list. I'm just not, in my clinic, no, I mean, I'm talking about that whole idea, because there's several of them. I spoke at one in Michigan. That's one of the largest ones. They're talking about going national. The Plant-Based Support Group, I'm missing one of the letters, but PBSNG or something like that. Fact of the matter is, having people who are like-minded to get together and support each other seems to be absolutely huge. And so I'd like to see more of that in cardiology. So I think he was next. Oh, yes.
No. Hello? Oh, my question is, I eat a tremendous amount of salt, yet the doctor's tested me a few times and I have my sodium level is too low. I drink a tremendous amount of water. Is that flushing it out? Because my doctor has no explanation and is bewildered.
So I have one word for you, nephrology. So if you see a nephrologist, they'll actually do your sodium balance and they'll help you figure that out.
Thank you.
So I don't actually know who's next anymore. But okay.
What's your personal experience in health changes?
Oh, health changes? I guess it was all over MedPage Today and New York Times about how I got into this space. It was really about my LDL cholesterol. I had been a professional tennis player, which then when I had kids became a professional tennis coach. And I had taught tennis for a living back in medical school, but I sort of stopped teaching. I would help out in junior developments here and there, but when my kids became serious about tennis, I was doing that pretty much full time. Then my youngest kid aged out of playing junior tournaments, went off to college. I wasn't coaching anymore, and all of a sudden, I wasn't playing tennis twice a day, every day, and my LDL cholesterol took off from about 115 to 170. At the time when we knew that the higher it was, the worse it was, and so that was when I had seen the stuff from Ornish, and I got exposed to more and more of that. The portfolio diet that I showed you with the LDL, that was published that same month, March of 2003. And so I went completely plant-based, and 6 weeks later, my LDL had dropped from 170 to 90. And so that was great. Yeah, it's really helpful. The other side of it, I didn't feel any different. I was losing weight because it wasn't because of the chicken and fish that was keeping my weight up. It was the fact that I was, had more muscle mass, and the more I did cardiology and less tennis, I lost weight because of that. I'd like to gain that weight back. Give me some time. But the other side of it that I had to mention, which I didn't think about until it happened to me as a clinician, was the blood pressure effect. Eating chicken and fish, no skin, not fried, was thinking that American Heart Association healthy diet, it still had animal flesh in it. And for I guess, a lack of vegetable protein in large amounts because I was using animal protein. I ended up with sort of a normal blood pressure of 125 going to 104, where it's stayed since then. And so, when I do my, I don't know if you've seen the American College of Cardiology risk calculator. It's an app, great. Everybody should download it and put your numbers in and see what your risk is. The big criticism is that every man over 60 is going to have a greater than 7.5% risk and be on a statin. Well, it's not true. If you have a blood pressure of 104, your risk is actually considered to be relatively low. So I think if I had to pick the two things, it would be cholesterol and blood pressure, but that underpins everything else, and that's the heart attack, stroke, and death.
Hi.
Okay.
How do you feel about CoQ10, ubiquinol, resveratrol for heart disease prevention?
So for heart disease prevention, resveratrol, I think I heard that on the list, that has had some positive data, but it's more observational. You'd like to see larger randomized trials. You can get it out of juices, you can get it out of wine, and it's still controversial. The number of positive studies sort of reminds me, just feels the same as the omega-3 stuff, which then someone just a few days ago published a large compilation of all the world's literature, and it was found that omega-3s do not help any cardiovascular condition whatsoever. The CoQ10, that was actually never designed to improve any outcomes. It was designed to stop the muscle soreness that some people get with statins. It's pretty effective. Some people would say it's marginally effective, but the one thing that's very clear is that it doesn't hurt the cardiovascular benefit of the statins. So I think that's it, huh? All right, thank you very much.